Burnin' Daylight. Welcome to Burnin' Daylight, the only podcast for the working cowboy. Well, howdy there, Daylight Burners. Happy Thursday. I hope everybody's doing well. It is warming up here, and we've got a potential screwworm crisis on our hands. It is back north of the border, and we'll have to see how that goes. But this is the Friggin Farm Ranch Report for Thursday, June 4th, 2026. So we're going to be talking about a bug that your granddad hated and that I myself and your kids have never seen, and that is the New World screwworm. It made a bunch of parts of the cattle business in this country damn near go broke in the 30s and in the 1950s. And then we spent inflation-adjusted numbers, billions of dollars, getting it off this side of the map. It's been back in Central America and Mexico for the past couple of years now. And now it's over the border with a confirmed case in Texas. But there is some good news, and try to look past all the scaremongering. We've got a lot bigger toolbox than they did the last time this thing ran wild. But anyway, I'm your host, Matt McKinley. I'm coming to you from Yerington, Nevada. Before we get into all this history, make sure you go like, subscribe, rate, review, all that good stuff on all the social medias. Wherever you listen to podcasts that I'm on there. Spotify's my main one. That's where I host everything at, but also Apple, Podbean, any of the pod catchers as they're called. Then YouTube, Rumble. The most important one though is Substack. That's where all this stuff is found. That's where you get ad-free episodes, minus any of the sale barn ads that I do. I don't have any at the moment, but go check that out. And it's you can find that over at burnindaylight.substack.com. And I'm going live on Instagram for the first time in, I don't know, maybe ever. So I'm adjusting where I'm at on the screen because it's a vertical layout instead of a horizontal. So anyway, that's what I'm gonna have to just let it go because it's not working very well. But that's neither here nor there. But please go support the show, burnindaylight.substack.com. You get a full rundown of this episode. So I do an immersive version of this show on Substack. So when I'm done, I put the full transcript with my words in it, with links embedded, and then charts and graphs and all the good stuff to make it a really cool, useful tool, not just me yammering at you. Show you that I do put some work into this. And you get access to the tool that I use mainly to put this all together, and that is the Burnin' Daylight Report. It's the dashboard. It's got market data, ag news, policy news. It's got a war tracker. It shows where we're involved throughout the world, which is basically everywhere. And with a lot of different news involved in that. Also, I've got the Man About a Horse app, which is what I'm calling an equine intelligence app. It's trying to put a definition on the different horse markets because there is not a singular horse market in this country. Unlike cattle to have some different markets, but generally there's kind of a one overall type of market when it comes to cattle. Horses, different beast, and I'm working on that. It's not ready yet, but it's getting closer. And now that I'm on the downhill slide with this little studio platform that I built, I'll start working on some of these other apps to streamline them. So anyway, before we get into the maggot talk, because that's what we're talking about with this screwworm stuff, let's take a look at the markets for today. All right. Slide 2. All right. On the money side, we're coming off a softer day than earlier this week. As of the June 2nd close, August live cattle were at 239.65. That was down 95 cents on the day. And August feeders were at 348.42. That was down 312. July corn finished at 440 and a half, down 3.5 cents. And July beans at 11.65 and a quarter. They were down 15 and a half. So the board's still telling you the same thing that we've been talking about. The cattle supply is tight. Grains are pretty shaky, and the trade side of things, it's nervous, but it's not real panicked. Those numbers don't sound exactly right. Burnin Daylight Report. There we go. I'll pop it up on the screen for you so you guys can get a good look at it. Get a gander at what I'm looking at. Okay, so this is let me shrink myself down here so you can see, and I'll park myself right there. So this is reading the herd, as I call it. And as you can see, corn's down 4.7%, 423 a bushel. We're at a watch stance on the market, 55% confidence. Cattle on feed at 11.584 million head. Ample supply in the pipeline right now, but the herd size is lowest it's been since Truman. Live cattle are weakening at 241.68. So the packer leverage is increasing. On the freedom framework, we got a 60 out of 100, which is mixed results. Feed costs are elevated, but they're manageable. Beef supply is pretty good right now. Policy risk is meh. Demand is pretty good. And weather and drought is getting better, but it's still pretty ugly. And depends on what part of the country you're in, because everybody in drought country is saying, bullshit, it ain't getting better. But maybe not for you. Other people we are. No update on the cash cattle, the 5-area weighted average yet this week. Still running off of last week's numbers. They came in at 256.81 a hundredweight, with the dressed price being at 405.20. Live cattle on today, the June live cattle, 241.68. That was down about 2%. And feeder cattle at 353.38. That was up $1.82, and that's probably on the news of this screwworm. Lean hogs at 101.63, up 660. I don't know if that's correct, but it looks good. On the sale barn side of things, Farmington Regional Stockyards there in Missouri, they ran 1,473 head yesterday. 557 was the average weight, bringing 453.26 average, which is down a little, but that's still pretty damn high. Look at some of the Beaver County this week on Tuesday. 856 was the average on that. They ran 4,993 head, averaging 347.96. And 4 state stockyards there in Missouri ran 2,688 head on Tuesday, averaging 549 pounds and 445.71 average on the price there. So those were kind of the bigger standout yards that we're looking at. I've got 20, as you can see, I got 20 yards that I'm looking at. Of those 20, we've got 19,830 heads sold with an average price of $386.65. So that's across all weights, all classes. And now let's take a look at the grains. Grains. That's what a vegan zombie eats. Close that down. All right. Grain futures. Corn. 423 and a quarter. That was down 20 3/4 cents. So that's some feed relief there. Soybeans at 1127 and a half. That was down 53 and a quarter. I'm not sure if that's right or not. What does my script say here? July corn finished at 440 and a half. That's what. So this is saying 423. Let me see CME. Markets, corn. Waiting on it to load. Market quotes. All right, so July corn, we're at 423.40. So yeah, we'll go with what I got here, 423 and a quarter. Soybeans at 1127 and a half. Hard red winter wheat's at 619 even. That was down 28 cents on the day. And soybean mills coming in at 312.50, which is down $14. So on the feed side, we're getting some relief. Not so much on the energy side. National on-highway diesel 535 on the week, which is down 17 cents, but I expect to go up next week. AAA average is at 539.4. That was down 18 cents on the week. Regular unleaded's at 424 a gallon. So we are seeing a little bit of relief, but on the crude oil side, West Texas index closed out at 92.96 today. That was up 80 cents a barrel. And the Brent index is at 95.26. That was up 28 cents on the day. I don't have too much of an update on the war reel. It's still going on in the Middle East. The Strait of Hormuz is still basically shut down. No peace, or there's been no deal. There is no ceasefire, and so that's where we stand on that. That is your war reel for today. I don't believe we've had any casualties or deaths on the U.S. side, which is good. But we are using a lot of ammunition. So. That's all we got on that. And on the market, we're still saying that the cash side is not agreeing with the board. And as you all know, I consider the cash market to be the market because it is. Okay. Where are we at now? Dun 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 dun. Okay. So the board's still telling you that the same story we've been talking about. Tight cattle supply, grains are shaky, and trade's nervous but not panicked. But underneath that, the fundamentals have not changed. The cow herd is still historically small. Replacements are expensive, and anything that even looks like a feeder is bringing a premium. The screwworm story doesn't flip the table overnight, but it's not a trivial side note either. The economists that went back and looked at at Texas in the 70s and then modeled a modern day outbreak say Texas-style screwworm establishment today could cost producers roughly $700 to $800 million a year and hit the broader Texas economy for around 1.8 to 1.9 billion a year. But on the flip side, staying screwworm free is worth roughly $1 billion a year straight to producers and about $3.7 billion a year when you count the whole economy. So that's what the stakes are. That's why the USDA and APHIS are throwing money at the Sterile-Fly production and surveillance and border control and emergency approvals instead of shrugging and telling you that it's just another fly. Down at the sale barn and the ranch level, the screwworm risk breaks into the same three buckets it always has. That's labor, death loss, and treatment cost. Also, just overall cattle performance, because when cattle are sick, they don't perform as well. That's a given. That is a constant. So back in the day, labor was the brutal part. So it was daily checks, roping, pouring Benzol in the wounds, and then painting them with pine tar. Any of the dead ones, you had to burn the carcass or bury them deep, and you still lost calves that you never got your hands on. Today, that's a little bit different, but not much. We have systemic products and better topicals, which means that each case takes fewer hands on and has a much better chance of walking out of the chute instead of getting dragged to the bone pile, which was supposed to be doused in diesel or kerosene and then lit on fire, or buried, or both. The cost of using these tools and tightening up wound management is real, but it's nowhere near the cost of watching that this whole deal get established and then chewing up a whole region's calf crop. So this episode's going to be heavy screwworm from here on out. We'll talk about it. I did some research on it, and I think while this is a big deal, there is going to be a lot of opportunity for scaremongering, and I think you need to ignore a big chunk of that. This could be very manageable, and even my research. So I use AI for a lot of research, and then I have it tell me what it thinks, and then I go back and read the articles that it pulls, and make sure that it's not lying to me. And but even in my research, it very heavy calls to authority. Only use the USDA and FDA approved stuff. Make sure you have a good a good relationship with your state vet and all that. And I have no issues with veterinarians. I've worked with a lot of them, but also I don't take their word as gold. A lot of them are lazy. Not every one of them, but you guys know. You guys have worked with the vets before. And when you got a good one, you make sure that you give them your business. But there's also some not very good ones out there. And particularly in the large animal business, all the money in the veterinary world, it comes from dogs and cats and horses. It seems like cattle and sheep and your meat production livestock, as they're a commodity animal, it's a commodity product. I'm still that'll be my weekly wrap up. It'll be the kind of the story of how the live cattle futures and feeder futures got established, and how they differentiate from other commodity markets and products. I had that planned for last night, and then as I was finishing up my research, I came across a story about this case of screwworm that made it across the border. So I put that on the back burner. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. But we're all screwworm all the time today. We'll talk about what this thing actually is, because most people under 60 have never had to think about it. We've never saw it. And now here we are. So the New World screwworm is a blowfly, and the larvae eat the live flesh instead of dead tissue. So a female fly lays a cluster wound or a body opening, whether it's a calf's navel or a castration cut, dehorning stump, the nose, the ears, the tail head, and the vulva. For if you want to be crude, that is the pussy area of the cows. Those eggs hatch in 12 to 24 hours, and then the larva burrow down into the tissue in a screw-like pattern. So it just makes it way down in there. The wound gets bigger instead of smaller, and it stinks, it drains, and the animal's in a ton of pain. And if you don't deal with it, especially in newborn calves and lambs, it'll kill them. Every warm-blooded animal that you run is on the menu. So that's cattle, horses, pigs, sheep, goats, wildlife, dogs, and even people. So if you like to walk barefoot and touch grass, which good on you, I think that's a good thing. But you get a cut on your foot, you are at risk for screwworm. In livestock, the risk climbs with every management practice that makes a wound. So that's branding, castration, dehorning, ear tagging, tail docking, and then calving, tick bites, and it wrecks out It really wrecks your herd if it gets established. Historically and today, the highest risk to animals are newborn calves, lambs, and kids, meaning goats, with fresh navels and no immune system and no way to outrun the flies. Take it back, a look through history and what our granddads used to do. My dad and some of his friends talked about doctoring screwworm cattle a bit. But it hasn't been a part of everyday ranch life in the U.S. since, nationwide since the 60s. There was a flare-up in the 70s, and then there's been some isolated cases, one of them being in the Florida Keys back in the 90s. But that was on deer almost exclusively. In the 1920s and into the 1950s, the playbook was pretty much all hard labor. A lot of elbow grease. USDA told ranchers spot the infested wounds early. That's still a good, still a good management practice, regardless of screwworms. Rope the animal and treat it right away. And the standard treatment was Benzol, which is essentially benzene. You poured it in the wound to kill the larva, and then you closed it up with pine tar oil to try and keep the flies from laying again and to protect the healing tissue. Folks were told to isolate infested animals and then burn or bury the carcasses or both. And then time your calving and your branding and castration so you were not having a bunch of calves with open wounds during the heart of fly season. When organophosphate insecticides showed up in the 40s and the 50s, they got used as wound dressings and in dips and sprays, but you still had to catch the animal and retreat every few days to make sure that wound healed. It worked on individual animals, but it was a grind. Labor intensity was off the charts, and you had frequent herd inspections, roping and restraining infected animals, mechanically pulling the larvae or flushing them out, and then applying your larvicidal dressings, and then hauling or burning contaminated tissues and carcasses. On the big Western outfits, plenty of cattle never saw a rope or a chute in between works, so the infestations got huge before anybody ever saw them. And that's where you saw the hide damage, your weight loss, and then a whole bunch of death, especially in calves and extensive cow-calf systems. There was no systemic protection. Once the topical wore off, every new wound was a fresh invitation to the flies. And adult flies could travel long distances, so you could clean up your outfit and still have fresh flies drift in and restart that cycle from the very jump. All right. So here's how we kind of went about getting it eradicated. Starting in the 1950s, USDA entomologist E.F. Knipling, 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 Knipling. I cannot read today or speak. E.F. Knipling and his crew developed the sterile insect technique, or the SIT, and that changed the game. They figured out that the female screwworm flies typically mate only once, and the flies are extremely aggressive suitors. So bunch of male blowflies got their dicks flopping out, and they're just they're flashing it everywhere, and that female mated once and then she died for the most part. So they mass produced these male flies, and then they treated them with radiation, gamma radiation, which made them sterile, and then they released them out in huge numbers over broad affected areas, and then those sterile males mated with the wild females, and the eggs did not hatch, so over time the wild population crashed. They started in the southeast and then expanded across the southwest, and by 1966, screwworm had been eradicated from the continental U.S. After that, they pushed the front south. Mexico was declared free in 1991, Belize and Guatemala in 1994, El Salvador in 1995, Honduras in 96, and Nicaragua in 99, and then Panama in 2000. A permanent biological barrier was set up in Panama. It was run by the Panama U.S. Commission for the Eradication and Prevention of Screwworm, or COPEG. Permanent meaning that now it's back, so it wasn't that damn permanent. Talking to my Cunafin guy when I was still at the feedlot, Cunafin produces the wasps that that get rid of that kill the fly larvae and help with your fly population. He was saying the biggest reason this screwworm deal is back is because those nuclear reactors that they use to make these sterile flies was too expensive to keep up and operate, so they just kind of stopped doing it, and therefore now we have this outbreak. So sterile flies were the star, but they weren't the only thing that got rid of it. So eradication depended on insecticidal wound treatment and carcass management to help keep local larvae from maturing into new flies. Movement controls and quarantines so the infested animals didn't get trucked into clean country. And surveillance and early detection using traps and producer reporting, vet inspections, and aggressive public education so that the ranchers knew what screwworm looked like and when to call it in. That is still important today. Economists ran the numbers and found out that wiping out screwworm in the U.S. generated roughly $796 million a year in direct producer benefits back in the 1990s. And around $2.8 billion a year once you count the broader economy. More recent work pegs the ongoing effort of staying screwworm free at about $1 billion a year to producers and $3.7 billion a year overall. These are estimates, and remember, these estimates can be wrong, especially when they're coming from the government. They typically are. All right. Let's talk about our modern toolbox. We've got a little bit more at our disposal than the old timers did. What is the difference? The first big difference is we have better tools that you can use on the individual animal. You still got to rope the damn thing or put them through the chute, but we're not just doing benzol, benzene and pine tar. The ranch size treatment still starts with the individual cowboy or the rancher. Same one, step one's all the same. You got to catch the animal, clip the hair, flush the wound, and physically remove the larva and the dead tissue. The mechanical debridement is the foundation of it all. That is catching them, cleaning it, clipping the hair, getting rid of the larva and the dead tissue. Now you got to bring the modern chemistry into the party. So topical organophosphates is a big one. So Coumaphos and modern pyrethroids and like permethrin or cypermethrin are labeled larvicides that kill remaining worms and protect the wound once you've cleaned it out. These are there are aerosol and spray products in the U.S. as well as pour-on. And the U.S. market specifically built for screwworm and ear ticks that combine these actives, so you're not inventing something, with diesel and a prayer. And then you've also got products like F10 antiseptic wound spray with insecticide, and that is an over-the-counter spray combining antiseptic and pyrethroid insecticide. And this is approved under emergency use authorization for screwworm in cattle, horses, minor hoofstock, some birds, and captive exotics. It is not recommended for dogs and cats, mostly just livestock. So the game changer compared to the Benzol days is systemic insecticides. So we're talking Doramectin, Ivermectin, and Fluralaner. These aren't just dewormers. They give you multi-day to multi-week protection against screwworm larvae when used under the right approval. I'm not so much concerned about the approval, except I don't want anybody getting into trouble. But if you've been around this business long enough, you know that there are plenty of drugs that work on multiple different applications, even if they are not labeled for such. One little trick that we used in the feedlot is like Draxin, for instance, is pretty effective against foot rot, but it's not labeled for foot rot. So in the feedlot, we would call them a respiratory, and then put as a note foot rot also. And in feedlot, you can get by with a bum leg steer and still ship him, but you can't have a bum set of lungs and that animal make it to harvest. So we treat the lungs first. So you call him a respiratory, even though he's not a pneumonia at all. And you treat him with Draxin, and that does do a pretty good job against foot rot. There's other treatments for it. And one of the things I can see here is producers, they get hooked on one particular antibiotic that they like, and they use it for everything. And that's not always the best case scenario. And if we look back to COVID, there's a lot of, the COVID vaccines were emergency use authorization. Got in a lot of trouble with the social media platforms for saying that, hey, I don't know about this vaccine, which wasn't actually a vaccine. It's more of a gene therapy type thing than a traditional vaccine. But I may still get pinged for that. But everything I end up saying about that was true, or at least partially true. So when we're talking about emergency use authorizations, I think it's also worthwhile to take a look at stuff that might work. And again, this case, Ivermectin, it's a dewormer. It's known to kill parasites, and that's what this screwworm deal is a parasite. Literally, it's feeding off a live tissue from a wound. So I would say Ivermectin is probably a pretty good first case scenario. It's cheap and it's easy to use, and it has shown to be relatively effective. Okay. So let's talk about the emergency use authorization. The big one is Dectomax CA1, which is a Doramectin injection, and it has conditional FDA approval specifically for prevention and treatment of screwworm, with about 3 weeks of prophylactic cover in cattle at the labeled dose. So prophylactic, that means as a preventative. So give it a shot if you have a case. It will kill the larva, especially if you get on like a baby calf. If you get it treated within 2 days, you have about 100% eradication of the screwworm larva. It decreases after that, but you still have preventative use or preventative coverage for about 3 weeks. Exalt Cattle CA1 is a Fluralaner topical, and it's conditionally approved for screwworm myiasis and cattle fever ticks in beef cattle and replacement dairy heifers. Your Ivermectin 1% injectable has emergency use authorization for preventing screwworm in certain classes of cattle when used around birth, castration, or when a wound appears. None of these drugs have full permanent screwworm label yet. They're running on conditional approvals and emergency use authorizations with defined withdrawal times and species restrictions. But they're real legal tools in your toolbox today, and they're probably pretty effective from what I understand. And then there's the supportive care. So antibiotics are not useful if you just see a fresh wound. Antibiotics treat the infection. So once that animal is infected, then I would guess your broad spectrum antibiotics are going to be your best case scenario. LA200, oxytetracycline, any one of those oxytet derivatives, depending on your concentration and whatever. Those tend to work pretty good. Same way with like Nuflor or Norfinical was the generic version that we used. Pretty good stuff. I would imagine that would be a pretty good use should they get infected. But if they're not infected, all you're doing is killing the good bacteria as well as any potential bad bacteria that's there. Okay. And then pain control is another thing, because when you got those little bastards screwworming their way down into a live wound, that's going to cause some pain, and pain reduces the production on your cattle. And so you get your Banamine. Now, luckily, you can vein that stuff for immediate effect. It doesn't last very long. And then they have the pour-on stuff if you're not good at finding a vein. I'm not. I could do it, but I'm not particularly good at it. But I can pour on with the best of them, I tell you. I'm pretty good at that. So all of those tools are available, and they were not back when Screwworm was in its heyday. So like we're sitting with a big leg up compared to the old timers, and that's a good thing. It also makes me a lot more hopeful about this not being like an actual huge crisis. So again, keep your head on a swivel, check your cattle, and for you guys that like to ride around and rope shit, well, looks like you're probably going to have a chance. So if you don't mind the South Texas heat, Arizona, New Mexico, anywhere along the border, where you're going to see it first. And then in the Southeast, that is where it could really take off, wherever it's going to be wet and humid, and the flies are around a lot longer than they are in the dry and higher elevations. So like I'm not too worried about it so much out here, because we have no moisture to speak of. We do have flies, but it didn't seem like it came this far north very often, or at least not in the same numbers as it did in Texas and the Southeast. So if you're in those areas, keep your head on a swivel, be ready. And if you got guys that like to rope, well, make sure you pay them well so they do a good job. Look, because this shit spreads, you're looking at doing a lot of nasty doctor work. Nasty because it's an open wound, and they get bigger and they stink like hell. That's one thing my dad always said. He didn't know what stunk worse, the wound or the medicine that you put on it. Okay. And then the tools over the landscape are better and more mature. So the sterile insect technique is not experimental anymore. It's the standard operating procedure. So the Copeg facility in Panama is still producing around 100 million sterile flies a week. And additional capacity is ramping up in Mexico with U.S. support. We've used this the sterile insect technique successfully to clean up the reinvasion before. There was a flare-up in Texas in the 1970s. And in the Florida Keys, there was a deer outbreak in 2016, and they both got handled with focused sterile fly releases plus aggressive treatment. So your surveillance is better as well. We got traps, we got lab diagnostics, and reporting systems that mean a single case can trigger a response instead of simmering in the background. If you have drones and know how to operate them, these could probably be a good tool for you. So you can scout ahead of your cowboy crew and let them know, like, hey, we got some over here. Use all this technology to your advantage. It is there, and it's not just for making pretty videos and stuff and taking awesome pictures. You can do that and still scout your cattle at the same time. Cell phones, also not a thing back then. Boots O'Neill, a friend of mine. It's kind of cool I get to say that. Anyway, he talks about the biggest change in ranching over the years, and he's seen a lot of them. He started his career when they still drove cattle to the railhead. But he said cell phone has been the biggest change in cowboying that he's seen over his lifetime. And like I said, he's seen a whole bunch. Another big difference is the economics and the policy environment both favor hitting this early and hard. We're not arguing about whether the screwworm is worth controlling anymore. The math has been done, and the answer is yes, it is worth controlling. Keeping it out of the U.S. is worth roughly $1 billion a year to producers and several billion to the whole economy. And letting it take hold in Texas, especially in cattle country, could rack up hundreds of millions of dollars in producer losses annually, plus broader economic damage. So that's why you've seen the border closures and import suspensions march north through Central America and into Mexico, and that's why there's real funding behind the Sterile-Fly plants, emergency approvals, and surveillance. All right. Here's a playbook for the modern world, and it'd be useful to take a look at it, I'd say. All right, I'll put myself here in the middle. First thing we got to know what we're looking for. So screwworm isn't just a few maggots. If you got a fresh wound that gets bigger and uglier instead of shrinking up, and it smells kind of rotten, kind of that sweet, sickly death smell, and then it looks like it's crawling even after you've knocked off the crust, you treat that as screwworm until you're proven otherwise. Navels on your calves, the castration cuts. So once you cut the bag, make sure that that wound gets covered up. Dehorning wounds and openings like the nose and the tail head are hot spots for all your animals, not just cattle. All right, I'll move over here. Second thing to look for, or second thing on the playbook is the modern stuff. So catch your animal, clip the hair in the area, flush the wound, and then pull every worm you can out. Cut away the dead tissue and hit it with some larvicide, whether that's Calmifos, permethrin, or screwworm aerosol, or an F10 type antiseptic insecticidal spray. This stuff is not easy to say. F10 type antiseptic insecticidal spray. Follow the label instructions on that. And wherever it fits your program and the rules, use systemic products like Dectomax CA1, Exalt Cattle CA under their conditional or EUA frameworks. Also, you could just deworm the bastards and not worry about the label, because all this insecticide stuff is for deworming, and cattle, it is standard practice to deworm them regularly, at least once a year, a lot of times twice. So you don't have to worry about the screwworm part of it if you just say I'm deworming this animal. Now, that being said, it is good to report the screwworm stuff, because then they can start releasing those sterile flies and get ahead of it as much as they can. So do pay attention to the withdrawal times and which classes of cattle all these drugs are labeled for. That's one thing. Like withdrawal dates are a real thing. Make sure that you're paying attention to those. Burn or bury the heavily infested material so you're not incubating the next generation of flies at your bone pile. So dead tissue, if you got to cut it away, make sure you bury or burn it. And then if they die from it, that's also something you got to take care of, because now you don't just have the one wound that you're dealing with. You're dealing with that whole carcass that can be just a breeding ground. So, and then also plug into the bigger system. So you're not helpless, and you're not supposed to sit on your hands until a vet gets there. So you absolutely can, and you absolutely should handle the hands-on treatment. Make sure you got the right information and products, but screwworm is still a reportable disease. And if the Sterile-Fly program only works if somebody tells the state vets and the USDA when and where they're seeing it. So as a sequence, you find the animal, you fix it, and then make a call to the people that are flying the sterile bugs around and running traps, so they know where to put them. The risk map. This is where we sit right now. Geographically, the risk isn't the same everywhere, and historically, the humid, warm regions like the Southeast and the Gulf Coast had longer screwworm seasons and heavier pressure than the high and dry country. So today, the immediate risk is highest at the southern border states. So Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, probably better add California on there too, because they're the closest to the current outbreak. Texas, New Mexico, Arizona being the closest. And they have long fly seasons. They got big cattle numbers, and they've got plenty of wildlife that can carry the larvae around. Places like here in Nevada and the high plains still got to pay attention, especially if you got cattle or horses coming from the south, but they're not as friendly to the fly year round. And especially since we don't have the big humidity problem like they do down there. Cattle still are worth the most outside of the horses. They pay the biggest bill, but they're not the only ones at risk. So sheep and goats are very vulnerable, especially lambs and kids with fresh navels. Horses and pigs can get hammered at surgical sites or injuries, and wildlife, especially deer, can be reservoirs that make eradication harder and more expensive. And that's exactly what happened with the deer in the Florida Keys back in 2016. All you guys down in Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and then in the Southeast, get ready, because I know it's dry right now, but we are in El Nino, getting ready to hit like possibly a super El Nino. They're saying, you never know. They change all these instead of just like a big rain, and they're calling it like an atmospheric river or a polar vortex instead of a cold snap. So it's something to look out, especially if you're in a hot, humid area of the country, and then by the border, because you're the closest to it. All right. I think that's all I got for the screwworm stuff. It is a problem, and it could be a big problem, but we got a lot more tools at our disposal than we had before. And one of the rarest tools that we have at our disposal now, and that's because these guys are getting old and dying off. But talk to some of the old timers that had to deal with this shit. They know what to look for. They know what it smells like. They know what the animal's going to look like. So use them to your advantage. If you know a lot of these old hands, a lot of them like to talk about this shit. Especially, like, I'm going to have to call Boots and ask him about the screwworm days. I'm going to talk to my dad, talk to Billy Whitfield, and some of those other old timers that really know what they were, or they had a lot of hands-on experience, so they know what they're talking about. And it doesn't take a USDA approval to go talk to one of these old guys. So use them to your advantage. I'm sure a lot of them will be happy to talk to you about it. And it's going to be useful. I promise you. All right, let's talk about on this day in history, and we'll get you out of here. So on this day, June 4th, 1893, a coastal steamer called the Santa Cruz pulled into port after 36 hours coming off of Santa Rosa Island off the California coast. She was loaded with 1,030 sheep, 15 lambs, and 60 head of cattle, headed to market on the mainland. Santa Rosa had been stocked hard for decades, and an 1858 inventory listed around 8,000 head of bullock, large and small, that's cattle, plus 6,000 to 7,000 head of sheep and a couple hundred horses. Most of it described as very wild. In the 1890s, outfits were using coastal steamers like the Santa Cruz as their sail barn truck, shuttling island stock to the rail and to the cities. Long before we argued about truck weights and EIDs, ranchers were already doing some wild logistics to get cattle and sheep from rough country to the buyer, even if it meant loading them on a boat and sending them for 36 hours across open water. Also, on June 4th, 1887, in what's now eastern Wyoming, a rancher rode into his brother's place south of Lusk on the Old Wood Ranch and got his first real look at what the big die-up winter of 1886-1887 had done. He later described the consequences: carcasses scattered, herds gutted, and ranges that had been considered full of cattle were suddenly looking empty. That wreck is one of the reasons big outfits started shifting away from totally open range and more towards fenced and better managed operations with hay put up and some kind of plan going into the winter. July 4th, 1887 is basically a snapshot of a cowboy realizing in real time what the cattle business was going to have to change if it wanted to survive the next bad winter. And I feel like we're doing a pretty decent job, at least of educating people on the screwworm deal, and maybe we'll come out of this with the herd, as small as it is, pretty much intact. Both of these stories, though, are reminders of the same thing we're talking about with the screwworm. The business takes some hellacious punches from winners and markets, and now from bugs, and then you either adapt or your business goes under. It dies. So the old timers fought screwworm with Pentar and Benzol and a lot of hard miles, and they made it work, but it took a pretty big toll. So now we've got better pharmaceutical and systemic drugs with screwworm labels. We've got a proven Sterile-Fly program, and we got clear numbers showing that keeping this bug out is worth every dime we spend. So don't panic. That's not your job. Your job is to know what it looks like, manage your wounds a little bit smarter, and have a plan for what you'll use if you see it. And if it ever shows up on your place, make sure you take care of the animal first, but call it in so the people in the airplanes and the labs can get their job done, and we can take care of this. So that's the screwworm situation as of today, June 4th. Historically, it's pretty nasty, and we've got a pretty good scare on our hands, but it's a much more manageable problem for U.S. ranchers in 2026 than it was in 1936, especially if we use the tools that we have, and that includes some of those guys that were alive in 1936, and there's not a ton of them left, but there's plenty of guys that worked on this stuff in the 50s and the 70s. Go talk to them, learn all you can about them, and prepare yourself for what could be a pretty ugly deal. Wrong one there. On the sports note, A's are up 1-0 over the Cubbies right now, bottom of the fifth. NBA Finals was last night. New York stole game one on the road at San Antonio. They won 105-95. Game two of the Stanley Cup final starts today. Vegas stealing one on the road in Carolina. They're up 1-0. I guess I got to root for Vegas because they beat the Avs, so I don't want to root for them, but I also don't want to root for Carolina. So I really don't care either way. But A's won the series against the Cubs. They're going for the sweep right now. JT Gins at 59 pitches, no outs in the fifth. Looks like he's had a pretty decent game so far. Had some traffic in the first, but got out of it. And Tigers sweep the Rays. That was yesterday. They're off today. And we got some pretty good baseball going into the weekend. And we'll have an episode tomorrow for you on the history of the U.S. cattle futures. So that's all I got for you today, but keep your head on a swivel. Don't let your butt crack. If you find any of that screwworm stuff, report it so we can get some of those flies with vasectomies. Essentially, you don't want a bunch of intact male blowflies blowing up your entire herd down there. So stay hooked, and we'll see you tomorrow. Now move your ass. We're burning daylight.
You rise up in the morning beneath the stars so bright. Pull your hat down, make sure your cinch is tight. Horse house is kinda snuffy. Cold chill up your spine. You'll get your ass moving, son. We're burning daylight. Burning daylight. Burning daylight. In the saddle till the job's done right. Just together, and you won't catch 'em all. But when you ride through the gate, make sure you sit up tall. I can see the horizon, it's looking pretty bright. Well, get your ass moving, son, we're burning daylight. Burning daylight. Burning daylight. In the saddle till the job's done right.